Matt here, and welcome to a special video with a double helping of GE power, or General Electric power. The first one is going to be the steeple cab, and the second one is going to be the AGEIR oil electric. Now the steeple cab, and I've got to credit a lot of the inspiration and prototype source information, is actually this book here, which is by Shade Tree Books, which is Interurban Electric Locomotives from General Electric. Now there is also a similar volume available for Alco supplied equipment, but I'm a bit of a GE fan out of the two, and this one's got some really nice photos and a lot of source material. You know, it's even got quite a lot of black and white photos. There's no actual schematics in this in terms of builders diagrams, circuitries or stuff like that. I tell a lie, there's one here, but these are often very rare, and the whole thing is because a lot of GE's products for the interurban market were done in very small batches of maybe up to 10, possibly with the occasional running above that, but all are pretty much custom run models, so they're all slightly different, and to be honest with you, it's a lot of them have been quite a few growing pains and all that sort of stuff, so you know, there's not a lot of paperwork that actually exists about a lot of the old designs. And this is the great thing about this book, is that it also deals with the start of General Electric as well, from their introduction, for all the growing pains, their export markets. You know, it even goes into some of the ones supplied to Mexico. So if you ever want some information about some of the GE steeple cabs for more interurban sort of railways and small industrial ones, this is actually a great book for you. And it covers, although there's only black and white photos within the book itself, there's actually a couple of nice colour photos on the front and rear. And that, in addition to some Googling, has been pretty much the whole existence for the steeple cab. So in addition to those, there's also the train simulator DLC for the Sacramento Northern. That's been a quite large influence as well, because I quite liked operating those electrics, and it's pretty much been the only DLC as far as I'm concerned to actually show you that sort of early electric history in terms of a digital format. Now obviously there is some freeware available, such as the New Haven Electrics, which was on rails across America, I believe, or that American train sim site. So you know, thank you for that. And I have downloaded it, but I've not had a chance to tinker with it yet. So enough of the babbling. We'll now go over to a review of the features of the model and some of the detail works. And here is the loco, and we're actually on the B end or bell end. There's no actual real differentiation with the centre cab, which is A and B, except for the equipment. So in this case, the A end doesn't have the bell and the B end does. And it is actually prototypical for the bell to only be on one end. So obviously this is the sort of like the louder end of the bell, and this will be the quieter end. So this B end is also the one which has the 9-volt motor bogie in it. There's actually no external difference between the powered one here and the unpowered one here, except for the metal rim on the 9-volt motor wheels, and possibly a slight difference in terms of the shape of the bogie. Other than that, they're actually both identical. Starting at the front of the loco here, and it's going to be hard to see, so I might take a separate photo. We've actually got two hoses down here. One is your standard brake hose, and then there's a second grey hose. I've stipulated that it might be that the grey hose is actually an electrical connection for when you're linking up units, or it could be it's another brake system, such as vacuum brakes or something along those lines, or possibly just a secondary connection in case the first one fails. You know, there's quite a lot of connections between these locos. So it could be that the grey one is a mains electric connection. So say for example you've got this locomotive connected to another one, and the other one doesn't have a working pantograph, or maybe it's a booster unit. You can actually feed it from this pantograph through that grey power cable into the next unit, and then you've got a second smaller cable coming off here. This is supposed to be a cable, and this might be your control cable, for example. So your power is distributed through this grey one, and then your actual control signals through this black one. Directly below this top cable, or this connection point, is the coupler cut bar, and this is actually uses minifig hands to represent the handles either side, and then you've actually got a brick arms monopod there jutting out to be the actual coupler release. Obviously these are more to scale than other ones, and these actually slightly foul the actual front step of the bogie, and these steps are on the prototype would actually be fixed to the body, but due to the lack of clearance between them, they're actually fixed to the bogie on this example. The steps themselves are fairly standard in design. There's a tile above a panel piece. The panel pieces themselves are the 1x4s in white, so they actually extend all the way from one side of the loco to the other, and these are actually mounted using bracket pieces on the piece that comes off the bogie. Now a point here is that these are actually separate both sides, so these are actually individually mounted, half this side, half that side, so that actually was quite a helpful piece in actually building them, so I can actually fit the pipes in separately. So I was able to do the brake ones first, and then I decided on grey for the second ones. Moving along, you've obviously got your bogies. These are asymmetrical, or rather they're symmetrical. So this side is a mirror of this side, and the opposite is actually different. So it's actually mounted further, closer to the end, I believe, on that side. So it's a bit different because these steps are actually not centered on the actual bogie. And this handrail arrangement, as far as I'm concerned, is the closest I'm probably going to get to a prototypical one. Some of them actually have an extra handrail this end of the locomotive as well. Some actually have one extending from the cab all the way down the nose to the end. Some of them have one going all the way to the nose, across the end of the nose, and then going back up. Some of them have the nose one and no others, so it's literally the body only ones in existence. I've gone to choose the external one, so you've obviously got your one here, and your one there. This one is actually for the steps mounted on the far side of the loco bogie, so you can actually get up. And you've actually got a maintenance door there, so that's the excuse for the handrail. So if you're coming up to do some maintenance, you've got a handrail here, and then you can actually access the door there. Now, this is a bit of a glaring fact that there isn't actually a handrail at the front. Personally, I believe I actually like that effect, that there's actually nothing here. It makes it look a bit more older, that maybe, they're not so concerned about safety. And, it's, in my opinion, it actually looks better that there isn't this glaring white sort of handrail at the front. What I might do, possibly to make it a bit more authentic to some models, is actually put a handrail on the nose here. But again, I believe that this sort of aesthetic, works the best. It's the most prototypical. Admittedly, I'd love to be able to actually put these clips underneath, but then I actually foul the top of the motor bogie, the sides actually just out on 1x3 tiles from the bogie, and then obviously if I put clips underneath there, that actually either fouls the step or the actual mounting points of the bogie side. So mounting them above is the only way to actually put these handrails on, short of actually just not having them at all. Now, the main difference between this end and this end of the loco, aside from the bell, is actually the louvres. So if I rotate the model round, you can actually sort of see that there's actually a twin door on this side, and the reason for that being is that the opposite side is actually something slightly different. So although this generally speaking looks the same, there's actually a few slight differences. So the main one really is the bell, but you can also notice the difference in doors. So there's two doors here, and obviously the batteries underneath are actually slightly different as well. So what I'm going to do now is flip the loco, and you can actually see the difference. Okay, so the loco has now been flipped, so you have the bell here, you can just about see it hiding behind the cab, then you've got your sides, and then you've got your battery, and this side actually has the battery connectors going up into the main body, and then you've actually got a polling beam here. So the reason you know, you got this bright reddish brown rod, you know, it's the only brown item on the actual loco on the exterior, is that originally there was an option of between locos and coaches, and not coaches, but locos and box cars and freight cars and that sort of thing, where you'd actually have polling pockets and actually push this, put this between the polling pocket on the loco and the polling pocket on the freight car, and you'd actually be able to push freight cars into sidings or spurs, to use the American term. And this is actually a reminiscence of that. This is actually prototypical. This is actually mounted underneath the cab. I've actually seen several photos of the polling arm being in, or polling beam being in this location itself. And the reason why this location is probably a preferred one is actually that this is actually really accessible to both ends of the loco. It's on a specific side as well, so it's on the AB side, if you like to call it that, because it's the side you're seeing from left to right. And it's really simply been modelled by a 6.6L beam with a couple of black clips to hold it onto the body, and then obviously you've got your little protrusion there, because it's actually the old umbrella style stand. Now, I did mention there was a difference in the doors, and this door is actually only one here, so there's not a double, and that's because you actually have a little cylinder style piece here. So this is actually only mounted with a 1x1 snot brick, and it actually juts out of the model. And this is again is another feature that is a bit different to the opposite side. I don't know what it's for, but it does seem to be a commonplace on GE General Electric steeple cabs that they actually have this little thing jutting out of the cab at one side. So I imagine it might be something to do with a small brake cylinder, or something possibly to do with the components or something of that description. If I open this door, there is actually nothing behind it. So if I pull it open, and that's another reason why these noses are quite tall, is actually so I can actually fit the doors in without hitting the handrail clips. So there is actually nothing in these, so both of the noses are empty, if you like. The only bit that's actually in there is actually the hinge plate and a few other bits to actually get the nose slope in. That's the only thing that's actually in there. So that's it for the exterior, and I'll actually take the cab off the roof and actually show you the inside. But before that, I'll actually just show you the pantograph here. This is actually mounted on the 1x4 modified plates with only external studs, so the centre two are actually just flat like a tile. And this configuration of pantograph is a temporary one. This is what I call a stage 1 configuration. So once I've actually converted this section here as well to the minifig hook hands and flex tube, it'll actually look a lot more better. And the only reason I haven't done that is that this is sort of an initial stage to actually get it complete, and then I can actually do some fine detail work later on to actually convert it up. And again, this is a technique I actually found on models over the years, and another technique to model a very nice pantograph is actually to use the Belleville ice skate, and I've actually just used two of these mounted with a single clip onto the cross arm, and then they're mounted inversely, so you've got this nice sort of curved over effect, just as the real thing. So here we have the cab with the roof removed and part of the windows and side removed, and you've actually got two control stands here, one for each method of direction, and these are both on the right hand side of the loco in the direction of travel. And the reason why these are mounted like so is because on the far end, so the trailing end as it would be, you've actually got the door into the cab. So obviously you'd enter here up the step, and then here into the door, and then into the cab itself. So you've actually got one facing either direction in the direction of travel, so this one is for driving that way, and you've got one here for driving this way. and you've got a little control lever here, as well as a cheese slope to represent the gauges, and then you've got a 1x1 red 4-petal flower to actually represent the control dial, or maybe an emergency button or something of that description. A lot of the control stands of these style of locos actually had a little vertical mounted display as well, and while I'd love to represent that, there's rather a lot of confines within the cab in terms of actually trying to mount it within this space. So I might modify these locos in the future to actually fit in a little control stand of some description mounted there, but at the moment it's not actually a requirement, I believe, for the model, and I believe this is actually quite well detailed. The only thing this is actually missing, in all honesty, is probably a driver figure, so I might actually just fit one in, or put one in the cab somewhere, you know, loose. But that's effectively it. So you've got duplicated control stands, one for either direction, and there is no difference between them. They're both identical, the same. I actually built them all at the same time, so they're actually interchangeable. So I could take this piece off here and then swap it with this one, and you know, do whatever. There is enough room in here to actually fit a minifigure in. But one thing I will probably say is that the chairs themselves could probably be raising up slightly, so the minifig is possibly in a better position to actually see what's happening. But as far as I'm concerned, this is actually more than enough in terms of detail. From, to be honest, now you can actually barely see in once the side is actually in and the roof is on. There's no representation of lighting or equipment or anything else, because these cabs were rather Spartan, and to be honest with you, even if you're doing switching duty or doing some freight haulage, your driver's going to be sat down, their bags probably might be behind them, or possibly in the other seat, or it might be on the floor, and you've also got your, you know, your second crewman, which will probably be sat in the other driving seat if it's free, and then you've got enough room in the cab, so maybe you've got your engineer, your second man, and then possibly a couple of brakemen or switching assistants or something of that type, or people of that type, and you know, you've got enough room for them to be stood around, or possibly even stood on one of the balconies. So that's it for the model, and also I'll go back to the chair and we can discuss some final thoughts. Okay, so that's the details, looks. So what about the future for the model? Well, on the whole, there's not a great deal left on the model I'd want to improve. Pretty much there's only two real areas really. One is the pantograph. The pantograph is good, don't get me wrong, but some of the flex tube on it currently is slightly oversized, and the lower section between the midpoint and the body is still those really old connectors, and those could have been swapped out to more modern designs effectively. And on the whole, it's not there's not a lot of detail left. The only other thing that I could possibly do in terms of changes would be to fit a second motor, because it's effectively a mirror image to the motors are, and the dummy motor can quite easily be swapped out for a full one, because it's been designed around the same mounting mechanism. So it's actually got one of the 4x6 plates in yellow. It's actually, I think, one of the very few pieces of yellow on the entire. I think it's the only piece of yellow on the entire model. You know, so it's very easy to swap it out for a second motor should the time arise or be needed to give it that extra performance boost. Personally, I don't think I'll actually need it, but the option is there, you know, should it be needed. Now moving on to the AGEIR oil electric switcher. Now this one has been on the much discussed and little seen for quite a while, and the whole reason for that is it's actually gone through a pretty major strip down, rebuild and reconfiguration. Not quite to component level, so individual bits and pieces. It's not quite gone that far, but it has gone quite far. And the whole reason to give the AGEIR Oil Electric a refurb is for a couple of reasons. The first one being is that I personally felt it didn't have enough adhesion weight. So basically it had plenty of power, but not enough weight to actually put that power down onto the rail. So it slipped a bit, and it had a couple of other issues as well. The other thing is that although it could be completely Lego in terms of you could fit a power functions battery inside it, and you could fit IR power functions receiver, and it could all be IR, and it would all sit quite happily, albeit very tightly inside the body. It wasn't the best of options. It wasn't all completely prototypical. You had to have a little IR panel, so the IR could be seen. The cabling as well was, I think, possibly snagging on the chain, and there was another issue as well with the chain as well, whereas one of the axles, which actually transferred power between the chain and the bogie on the opposite end where the motor was, actually wasn't fitting properly, and it led to some slipping and performance issues. So there was quite a lot of reason to actually give it a proper refurb, and it is actually refurbed, and this is why I've been looking down, is because I've actually got it here. Now I've actually taken the central roof off, so you can actually see inside. So you can actually see, if I show you here, this is actually the viewers. So I've managed to fit one in here, and this has actually been a great benefit, and this has actually been the whole reason for the refurb, is that I needed to move away from power functions in order to improve the model's weight, and although the control was fine, moving away from the infrared system will undoubtedly lead to a lot of benefits. So that's why I've moved away from this, from the old power function stuff onto this. So the other reason for moving to the BU is that it's only 3 bricks high instead of the 4. So there's actually a benefit to that as well, in that because it's only 3 bricks high, I can actually do a slight rebuild of the chassis, because the whole problem was that to get the chassis into this model of this size, you had to actually use the battery box as part of the components holding the chassis together. So now that that's been taken away, I've been able to tile slightly and change the body slightly so it's a bit more firm and a bit more together. And with the 2 plate gap, I've actually been able to put a weight in. Now the weight itself was actually formed of 2 components. This is some ferro tungsten powder, and this sort of method was actually gone over in one of the old What's Neat This Week videos, and it's actually a suggestion from Joe Fugate. So even from the model railway world, Lego trains can get some inspiration. And Joe Fugate's suggestion was to mix this with plaster and then a little bit of water, and you can actually make a weight or make a little putty, and you can actually put it in places. My original idea was to use this ferrotungsten powder along with, if I can find it, some of this, which is DAS modelling clay. Oh, there. And that was a very nice idea. Great intention, didn't quite work out. So I actually had to change it for a different solution, which was actually to use this sort of craft PVA glue. This is a nice cheapo pound shop. No, it's the works. So it's £3. Was £3 for the tub. Give it a good shake, and you get some nice craft PVA glue out of it. And so those combined with some cling film to shape the model and some formers actually help. So this is the one former. So this, you can see it's got like a little trough in the centre here, and then it's got this nice tile around the outside. And the whole reason for the tiling was I needed to have a nice smooth surface so I could see it with eye to make sure it was nice and flat. So you've got this one here to actually form the weight, and you've got this one here to check the weight as well. So this is more just to make sure that it wouldn't go beyond the 2 plate height, and this one is actually to form the weight. And the reason you've got the pieces of fence here, that this was actually to cope with the cling film overspill. So the cling film would sit in here along with the weight, but then to sort of make sure the excess cling film wasn't going to cover the model and not help with glue set, I actually had to wrap it round, and this is what these fences are for, to help with that. So this was a reasonably easy way of getting the weight, and the whole reason it is a 2x8 size is that it actually sits underneath the view, is kind of in the centre as much as possible. The whole problem with oil electric, and it's not to do with any. It's a bit of a design problem. In that to get a mechanism of this size working, there's actually a 9-volt motor to drive the chain that drives both motors. So to fit that in, because it's only a 7-wire model, 4 of those inside body studs are taken up with the battery box and the motor, leaving a single stud for the chain. So obviously I want to try and centralise or push over to the chain side as much weight as possible so that it's a bit more evenly distributed. And that was one of the big model issues with this model, that a lot of the weight was all on one side. So that's why you've got the weight not only 2 studs wide and more towards the centre as much as possible, but also quite low down. Is that weight is best added as low as possible to the model, because if you add it too high, it can lead to the body rocking and that sort of stuff. So, you know, that's why this is like this. The other benefit of adding the BU is, aside from the fact it's only a smaller battery box, is that you don't have to have the AGEIR receiver. So the one cab that was applied with the power function receiver is now free, and that actually leads to a bit more strength and structuring for the roof as well. So the only negative about changing that is that I've had to change the roof panel format, and they actually now are a bit more fastened in. Not necessarily a bad thing, but you know, it's nice to have that. In terms of improvements to the model, the only real one I can personally think of at the moment, which I'd want to do, is actually to add some more weight to the cabs on the chain side. So I could add in some extra pieces of weight, in terms of maybe a couple of nuts, sort of metal nuts that you use to hold bolts on, or possibly some more custom weights using a different style of mould, effectively, and you know, mount those on the effectively in the corners, because the Lego weight bricks, and I did have one readily available. The only weight bricks Lego have ever actually done have been these 2x6s. Which are about 2 bricks high. Nice concept, but these are too big for the model as they stand. I could annoy everyone and cut one in half, but that doesn't really defeat the object, and then I've ruined a piece of Lego. So you know, I wanted to move away from that as much as possible. So the one chunk of roof is actually just a central bit, so I can actually just plop that in pretty much fairly easily without any issues as well. And there you have the roof. So you don't have the annoying power functions AGEIR window about here. So that doesn't exist anymore. The roof is a bit more solid. It's not quite perfect because I'm missing some 1x6 tiles realistically. I could do with reinforcing it a bit up here. This end's a bit weak. But other than that, you know, I think it's good enough. So the only real thing really to do aside from that is to actually take it to Thirsk, because that'll be my first Lego into the year. Give it a little dust down obviously before I go, and then it can go and have you know, have a little run, and you know, we'll see how it performs. So that's the oil electric discussed. So effectively, that's really it for the GE Power update. So yeah, the steeple cab is the thing that needs any work really. The oil electric really is just awaiting some testing. And following on from some of the changes, I have actually done some testing, and it was actually able to pull the steeple cab on its own without most of the body on. And that was without the weight as well, after I'd fixed the initial chain problem. So even just fixing the chain problem on its own for the transfer axle has increased its ability to pull, and obviously the extra weight, and with the body attached, it should pull a reasonable load. I'm not expecting more than, say, 3 cars plus a caboose. I think it would be harsh to expect anything more than that. It is, after all, a switcher. It's not designed for heavy applications. It's more designed for positioning cars around rather than pulling great strings of them. But nonetheless, it is going to be an interesting test of strength in the future for it. So if you've got any questions, please let me know. I'll try and answer them as best I can. If you do want to have a bit more information about the AGEIR oil electric, I think there's an episode of Bricking It on it, and I will also include the original model it was reverse engineered from, which is actually on Eurobricks. And that's it for this update, and I'll see you in another video coming soon. So that's it for now, and see you later.